We have Amanda Christman Larson with an icebreaker. My icebreaker, Amanda Christman Larson.
I would kind of like a wassail right now. Oh, I apologize for coming in a little late today. It was an incredibly busy morning for me, but I have the power shawl on, so I know I'm going to do great. Okay, I was really trying to think of how exactly to direct this speech. I wasn't sure what parts to start with, and so I thought about statistics. Everybody always gives their statistics, and so my statistics are this: I'm 30-something years old. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I was born in St. Louis. I grew up in Iowa. In my life, I've been a waitress, a volunteer firefighter, a writer, a journalist, a farmer's wife, a veterinary assistant, a publisher, but not in that order. I'm a football mom, and I'm a frequent insomniac. I'm a vegetarian. I love Hayway and Chipotle, and I have lots of friends, sometimes too little time. And I'm very concerned about our planet, but there's also a lot more on top of those statistics. I'm a person who's deeply concerned about the lives of people who don't have the opportunities that I've always had. In the last 3 years, my life has changed from a Coach purse-loving, manicured, expensive SUV driving woman to someone who's learned to live with less and do more for others. And I love who I'm becoming. About 1.5 years ago, I made a conscious decision to change my life. I've always known that I had a greater purpose than just punching a time clock. I decided to be true to myself and true to that voice inside my head that told me there was more to life. My family had faith in me, and that was all I needed. I quit my job, we traded our Infiniti for a Saturn, and a couple months later, I ended up on a plane to Ghana, Africa. I arrived in Ghana by myself, not knowing a single person in the entire continent, which is a little bit intimidating. I stayed in a hostel and taught 4th grade in an orphanage located in a slum. My classroom was very small. It was a hot concrete room with a leaky corrugated tin roof, and it was equipped with only rickety desks made of wood and a chalkboard. A lot of times the school would run out of chalk, and so the teachers would have to share and go back and forth between classes. And a lot of times the children would have to share their ink pens with their siblings, so they would be running back and forth between classes to share their ink pens. I learned a lot about poverty, and I learned about suffering at this place. And through that, I learned my role as a have in a world of have-nots. I became fully aware of my calling to make a difference. And many people have asked me about Ghana, and they hear a little bit and they shake their heads and they say the problems are just too big. How can you possibly make a difference? And I honestly have asked myself that too. In fact, when I first arrived, I thought I had a good handle on what those problems were. I was so wrong. The problems are so big and so complicated that it's almost too much to think about. 1 in 3 children is trafficked for child slavery. The educational system is broken. The government is corrupt. Water, electricity, and other utilities are unavailable or unreliable. 500,000 people have HIV, which is the virus that causes AIDS. And hunger, malaria, tuberculosis, and waterborne illnesses kill hundreds of thousands of people in a place smaller than the state of Arizona every year. About 2 weeks into my trip, after days of teaching in the heat, taking bucket showers, and eating countless bowls of white rice with tomatoes and little bug carcasses sprinkled in, I called my husband, and I couldn't talk. Instead, I just cried. I cried and cried, and he sat silent on the other end of the line. Because what I had realized was that my version of normal and my version of what suffering is were really nothing like what it really is. I realized that I don't have the answers I thought I did, and I realized that the fortune I had fallen into simply by being born into a place where I have enough food, enough money, enough love, was just clearly I was just very lucky to have done that. I cried for all these things, and I cried because I knew that a part of me had died and was going to be replaced with something I didn't yet know. Since that day, my life has changed. Instead of feeling hopeless and helpless, my experience empowered me. I realize now that making a difference has nothing to do with my own ego, but at the same time, I have the power and I have the resources to make change. I started volunteer organization when I returned, and now I'm paying my experience forward. I know that I can be a catalyst for change, but that will ultimately need to come from the people of Ghana themselves. But I'm helping by providing organizations there, such as schools, orphanages, AIDS clinics, pediatric clinics, maternity clinics, with staffing and also funding and awareness of their issues. Little by little, I am making a difference. In July, I returned to Ghana for the 3rd time in a year and stayed for nearly 2 months. I traveled the country visiting rural areas where few aid groups are going. I met village chiefs, spoke with elders, and had some of the most amazing cultural experiences I could ever imagine. But witnessing child slavery on Lake Volta by far was the most jolting experience I've ever had in my life. In these poverty-ravaged villages, children as young as 4 years old are sold into slavery by parents who cannot afford to feed them. These children work on rickety fishing boats, forced to dive into the dangerous crocodile-ridden waters of Lake Volta and untangle fishing nets. The life of a child is less important than the material used to make a fishing net. Sometimes the children come up and sometimes they don't. I met with village chiefs and elders who told me that education is the key to fighting child slavery. There are 215 children enrolled in the primary school in the village and only 2 teachers. The education they get is not good enough to qualify them for jobs, and so there's no hope. By increasing the level of education, we can give parents choices. My family is returning in February to build teacher and volunteer houses so that teachers can be recruited, and my organization is continuing to raise awareness about child slavery. So who am I? I'm a mother, a wife, a normal person, and I'm a woman who's making a difference.
Thank you, Madam General Evaluator, fellow Toastmasters, especially Amanda. Thank you so much. Normally with an icebreaker, we get a little bit of information, a little bit about the person. You opened your soul to us, and you showed us a side of you that most people would never let people see. When you actually made a major change in your life, you told us how, why, which, and what. Let's start off with the strong points that you already have. You have wonderful presence. Even though we don't have a lectern here, even though we're in an unfamiliar room, and you really weren't sure that you wanted to be doing this, you stood up here foursquare and gave us a speech. There was no fidgeting, there was no fumbling, any of that stuff. You had your notes. When you weren't using this hand, it dropped back down to the side instead of the motions that I'm always making with them, just because I've got to do something with my hands.
It's because it was shaking.
There was a little bit of that, but that's fine. You have a great voice and that wonderful smile. You had us immediately. Then we get to your writing. You write wonderfully. The turns of phrases, I kept wanting to write them down, but then I'd have to stop listening. I didn't want to stop listening long enough to write them down. You did a wonderful job of saying, okay, what would people normally see in an icebreaker? Well, let's get the statistics out of the way. Boom, 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 boom. And then you told us what you really wanted to tell us about changing your life, about going to Ghana and all the rest of it. And that's just fantastic to be able to do that. Now, a couple of things that you can work on. One of them is you were a little bit nervous, so you kept speeding up and speeding up and speeding up the farther you got down. I don't know if you were worried about running out of time or what. Don't worry about that. Okay? If you go over your time, you know, next time I write a little shorter speech. Do the speech at the pace that you want to. You do some wonderful things with raising and lowering your voice, which really brought us in on that. Your use of notes was very good. We're going to be working on you with using less notes. But as soon as you got up here, you took control of the room, you took control of us, you took control of our hearts. You write wonderfully, you speak wonderfully. There's a couple of things that we're going to work on with you, a little bit on the pace and on your use of notes. But Amanda, that was absolutely wonderful, and I can speak for all of us when I say we're looking forward to hearing a lot more speeches from you.